Pretty much everyone is hyped for the long anticipated film adaptation of Wicked. And I wanted to tackle a crazy fact about the musical, and that is, despite it being one of the most successful musicals of all time, it was snubbed royally at the Tony Awards. But even more shocking was the musical that beat it out. It's a true David and Goliath tale, but with way more sassy musical numbers. Before we begin, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more great content. Now, back to the video. Based on Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, the musical version, just simply known as Wicked, has delighted audiences with its imaginative storytelling, whimsical sets, and memorable music. Acting as a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, we see Glinda, the Good Witch, and her relationship with Elphaba, aka the Wicked Witch of the West. The idea to adapt Maguire's novel into a musical was conceived by composer and lyricist Stephen Schwartz. He teamed up with writer Winnie Holtzman to create the book for the musical. Together, they crafted a narrative that delves into the themes of identity, race, mortality, and the nature of good and evil. Reviews were lukewarm. However, the show was an instant hit and is now produced on a global scale. So, at that year's Tony, you would think that the show would be a Ruby shoo-in for every major category.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
However, Waiting in the Wing was another musical that would instead snatch all the awards that night. Enter a quirky show about raunchy puppets. The concept for Avenue Q originated with Robert Lopez and Jeff Marks, who met in the late 1990s. Both were inspired by their love of puppetry and the educational television show Sesame Street. They envisioned a show that would address the challenges faced by young adults in modern society, blending adult-themed content with the whimsy of puppetry. The show was developed over several years, with Lopez, Marks, and director Jason Moore refining the script and the music. The show featured a mix of human and puppet characters, each representing different aspects of life's struggles, from finding a job to dealing with relationships. The story begins with Princeton, a recent college graduate who moves into a rundown New York City neighborhood on, you guessed it, Avenue Q. He is in search of purpose in his life, and along the way, Princeton meets his quirky neighbors, including Kate Monster, an aspiring teacher, Rod, a closeted Republican banker, Nikki, Rod's slacker roommate, and Brian, an unemployed comedian. Almost forgot, the super is none other than Gary Coleman, the former child star. Avenue Q premiered off-Broadway at the Vineyard Theater in March of 2003. The production quickly gained a following for its edgy humor and heartfelt storytelling. The show's success off-Broadway led it to transfer over to Broadway later that year. Right away, the show was a critical darling, unlike Wicked, which had mixed reviews. Surface level, it's a kid's show on acid, which, it certainly is. Thankfully, though, the show uses its wacky premise to get your attention, then it uses its daring humor to tackle huge subject matter like racism, sexuality, and being one's authentic self, and just navigating a sometimes cruel world. There is a strong theme of banding together in scary times, something that was just as true now as it was in 2003, maybe even more so. Oh, and there's a hilarious song about internet porn. Balance. You really couldn't find a more opposite pair of shows. One is a whimsical and emotional retelling of The Wizard of Oz, and the other is a slice-of-life satire. And listen, I know you all have your preference in which show you like better, but to say that Wicked was taking Broadway by storm is a bit of an understatement. So, leading up to the Tonys, it seemed like a smart bet that Wicked was going to make a clean sweep of all the major awards that night, including the big prize, Best Musical. But Avenue Q swept the Tonys that night, winning almost every major category, including Best Musical. Wicked didn't go completely empty-handed that night. This was called the biggest upset in Tony history, but what happened? The Tonys, much like the Oscars, require a lot of campaigning via the media, but for lack of a better word, sucking up to voters 735 of them to be precise. I'm going to compare this to the Oscars, and even more specifically, the infamous Oscars where Shakespeare in Love swept the awards. You see, this human bag of turds campaigned so hard and so aggressively that film scholars have written articles and even books about it. It's believed that, much like this turd campaigning hard for Shakespeare in Love, the folks over at Avenue Q did the same with Tony voters. The Tony has an interesting quid pro quo. In Staged Right's video, The Great Upset, Wicked vs. Avenue Q, he put it like this: pitching to a Tony voter who also is a theater owner offers to play in their city, making the theater and the voter a lot of money. Maybe it doesn't seem ethical, but it's very much how it works. And this certainly would have worked with a big show like Avenue Q, but the latter went with a simpler but highly effective route. Enter Vote Your Heart. A reported $300,000 was spent on the Vote Your Heart campaign. Now, remember, 2004 was a huge election season, so wisely Avenue Q used this as a springboard for their campaign. They turned the outside of theaters into whimsical campaign headquarters, with people handing out election-style buttons. Pizza parties were held for out-of-town Tony voters, and were even given a private performance with a special number which cleverly poked fun at the other nominees. The setup for the new number goes a little like this. Rod must decide who he wants to vote for in his Rotary Club, referring to Wicked as the, quote, wealthy friend, which is a smart move, playing up the underdog aspect, though putting down other shows to gain votes is, in my opinion, kind of cringy.
You did this for what? Why not?
However you might feel about this tactic, it was highly effective. By giving the Tony voters a one-of-a-kind performance, including a pizza party, a far cry from these stuffy parties they were probably used to, this was highly effective. Again, by poking fun at high class and playing up the show's humble roots was a really smart play. To cap it all off, every single Tony voter got a CD with the song Vote Your Heart. The big night arrived and Avenue Q was winning categories left and right. And finally, Best Musical. The other nominees were The Boy from Oz and Caroline or Change. I know this has been pointed out before, but Nathan Lane's face here is priceless.
Avenue Q.
Awards are a strange measure of the value of anything, and the Tonys is certainly no exception. While Avenue Q burned hot in the early 2000s, and don't get me wrong, it still remains popular, it never rose to the same heights as Wicked. That doesn't mean one is inherently better than the other. Both are works of art, and art is highly subjective. For me, as a young queer teen, I found a lot of comfort in Avenue Q, and it did help me through some hard times. But as I got older and was turned on to Wicked, that musical also speaks to me, but in a different way. The battle at the Tonys in 2004 is an interesting snapshot in not only the theater world, but what was happening with the country as well. So Avenue Q using classism and their grassroots approach to campaigning is quite illuminating. So while Avenue Q walked home with most of the major awards, Wicked seems to be hotter than ever. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please wait in the comments below and let me know what y'all think of the Wicked v Avenue Q debacle. I'm assuming most of y'all are Wicked fans, but do we have any Avenue Q stands out there? Let me know, and I hope y'all have a great day, and I'll see y'all in the next video.